All right, so this weekend we got Corey Sandhagen taking on Davison Figueiredo, and we got the co-main event that is Renier de Ridder versus Bo Nickel. Two really big fights for this card. Really good matchups. I think the UFC is getting better with having like these smaller fight cards. Having a little bit more of an entertainment value for the fans. So shout out for the UFC for that. I know that the UFC has been giving us a lot of stinkers. Especially on fights that aren't official, like fight cards and stuff. But I think that fights like this, they have DeRitter and Bo Nickel and Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. Fights that could be in pretty much any card. Have them on these smaller like fight nights. I think it's a very good thing from the UFC. But let's go ahead and talk about these matchups, especially the Bo Nickel versus Renier DeRitter, which I think is a good matchup. For whatever reason, there's so many people out there that just want to see Bo Nickel take an L, and I really don't get it. I mean, Bo Nickel, in my honest opinion, has been keeping it, pretty straightforward and professional. I think that some people just don't like the way that he comes off. Some people think that he is like a I don't know, like this guy that just thinks he's all that, but I really don't see it. I think that Bo Nickel, whenever he answers questions, he's talking about, the ability that he sees in himself right now. And obviously, whenever you have a lot of confidence within yourself, it could come off, as you being like an asshole, or you being like conceited, or, you give yourself like too much praise, which I definitely understand why some people might think that. But Bo Nickel has been in competition for a long while. And I think that if he, sees things, at a different light or level than most of the fans, he's gonna, obviously answer some of those questions, in an honest manner. And I think that some people just don't understand that Bo Nickel has a lot of hype behind his name because he does come from a wrestling background and he was a very successful wrestler. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about this matchup. And this is where things get pretty interesting because a lot of people are out there thinking that Renier de Ridder is just gonna have the time of his life, fighting someone like Bo Nickel, and he's gonna expose Bo Nickel for being a fraud in the UFC. But I just don't see it that way. I mean, I get why people are saying that because Renier de Ridder is like on a 2 submission win streak in the UFC, and I understand why people would pay Renier de Ridder over Bo Nickel. But in my honest opinion, I just feel like Bo Nickel is gonna out wrestle and even out grapple Renier de Ridder. I mean, that's just my honest opinion, and I think that Bo Nickel's experience in that department is going to show in this matchup. If Renier de Ridder um, pretty much tries to look for some of those positions against Bo Nickel, I think where Bo Nickel has the advantage in this fight, without a doubt, is in his striking. And some people just don't like the fact that Bo Nickel is a good striker, but he is a good striker. He is a very good striker, and some people just don't give him credit for that. I mean, if we look at some of these statistics, I understand why people would say that Bo Nickel, sucks as a striker. He should just, try to win fights by wrestling and grappling, and that should be his main base. But Bo Nickel's not a dumb guy. He is literally not a dumb fighter. The reason why he doesn't land as much, the reason why I say that is because obviously some people are going to be looking at this 2.5 landed per minute, and that's on the low end. Most elite strikers in the UFC are averaging about 4 or 5. Like, think about Max Holloway or Ilya Topuria, Alexander Volkanovski. They're averaging like close to 5, if not 6 strikes, significant strikes per minute. But Bo Nickel, he just doesn't operate like that. He's like literally looking for that one punch to hurt you, to gain momentum, and then look for positions to follow up on some offensive or defensive schemes, depending on the position, whether his opponent's trying to be, a counter fighter against, Bo Nickel's offense. But it's all depending. And Bo Nickel is really good at finding positions, gaining momentum, to land more offense on his opponent. That's something that most people don't even fucking talk about for whatever reason. But for those of you guys that understand striking, you guys understand how big momentum is in a fight. Like, if you land one heavy shot and that is able to break your opponent's base, or your opponent is in a retreat, you could pretty much gauge on how to pretty much maneuver yourself into ending the fight early or getting a definite win on that round. And yes, we do see more of that, at the high end, especially whenever there is that big discrepancy between a grappler and a more striking uh type fighter, because bases are important. But Bo Nickel, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter if he chooses to wrestle or if he chooses to pretty much try to land offense to finish a fight. I mean, depending on the position, in my opinion, Bo Nickel is just gonna take it, step by step, and it's going to be a case by case basis on what he decides to do. He's not going to have an overall like game plan on how to beat his opponents. And we've seen him do that, in wrestling. Everything is position based. Like, okay, how can I, gain a favorable position being in a bad position? Even stuff like that. I just feel like some people just don't give Bo Nickel the respect that he deserves. And I feel like getting a win over Rainier de Ritter, in my honest opinion, is just gonna change the narrative for him. I think personally that he's gonna get it done. And that's just not me, trying to glaze Bo Nickel. Getting the win that he got over Paul Craig was very impressive. Paul Craig is a tough motherfucker. He can crack. He can land punches. Obviously, his forte isn't really the striking, but that doesn't mean he can't strike. People got to remember that he's a professional MMA fighter and he was once a ranked guy. Everybody that's ranked can crack. They could all strike. They could all grapple and wrestle to a high degree. I mean, they got to a ranked position. Not every fighter can say that they even got to the rankings. And Bo Nickel was able to pretty much out outwit, outmaneuver a ranked guy, a guy that has, experience fighting at the top of his division. And that was a really, really good win for Bo Nickel. And some people just don't give him any credit for that. And I think that the narrative has gotten so bad to the point that people don't even give Bo Nickel the credit that he deserves for that fight because of how he was answering questions, after that matchup. Bo Nickel was saying that, oh yeah, I expected to win. I expected to pretty much get a win over Paul Craig, and some people just didn't like that he was saying all that, even though Bo Nickel was answering the questions truthfully. I at least felt like he was. I didn't really see anything that was too disrespectful that Bo Nickel said. I mean, he would say anything. That any confident fighter would say, like, oh yeah, we prepared well, we had a good camp, and we just prepared smart for a guy, a tough motherfucker like Paul Craig. And some people just didn't like that he said all of that for whatever reason. But against Rainier de Ritter, it is going to be a different fight. We got to remember, Rainier de Ritter is a championship level fighter. This guy was a championship at one championship, and I'm not saying that one championship is up to par with the fighters in the UFC. I think the UFC, in my honest opinion, has the best fighters in the world without a doubt. But like the competition at one championship is still pretty high. There's people there that are training each and every single day. They've been champions in other organizations, and they're not like freaking scrubs per se. There's some real competition at one championship, and Rainier de Ritter was a champion there. So this would be a good win for Bo Nickel. Obviously, he's not gonna be nowhere near fighting for the title or fighting a contender or having a elimination contender bout for the belt, obviously. But I just think that this would be a step closer towards that goal. I mean, maybe a win over Rainier de Ritter and a win over another high, ranked guy probably gets him, in the conversation for at least being a contender for fighting for the belt. And if he's able to win this fight in a easy manner, I think, in my honest opinion, that Bo Nickel gets a freaking fast ride to the belt, similar to how Kamzat got it, because if Bo Nickel is that next big American star, you guys don't think that the UFC aren't gonna try their best to try to push him as much as possible? I think honestly, yeah, they obviously are gonna try to fast track Bo Nickel into getting him into superstar stardom because we're seeing now more fighters than ever. I mean, especially from like with the most recent generation, like the Justin Gaethjes, Dustin Poiriers, like those type of stars, they're starting to retire. They're going into the retirement fights. They're not going to be fighting in the UFC for very long, and the UFC needs to develop stars now. They are in desperation mode to create stars now because they need to sell future events. And the only way to get people to give a fuck about the sport is to get superstars in the sport, obviously, that are doing well now and just blow them up. Literally blow them up. The same way they did to like Charles Oliveira whenever he was on a win streak. The same thing that they're doing now for other fighters in the organization as well. I think that Bo Nickel is gonna get close to superstar stardom after this win on Rainier de Ritter, which I do think that he's gonna get. I think that Bo Nickel is the obvious favorite in this matchup. If you guys are picking Rainier de Ritter, I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. I think that Bo Nickel gets it done without a doubt. And then after that, he is making his title run 100%. I think that he is making his title run after he gets this win over Rainier de Ridder. Okay, now we have to talk about Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. This is a very, very interesting matchup for the division. Let's go ahead and talk about why this fight is so freaking important. I mean, it's pretty obvious. There is no real contender in the bantamweight division. I mean, they gave a freaking rematch to Sean O'Malley undeservingly. He got dominated by Merab Dvalishvili the first time around, and they're giving him a rematch. What the fuck? That's because there is no clear contender in the bantamweight division. Obviously, the last guy that was the clear contender was Umar, but he freaking lost to Merab, and obviously he has to work his way back up, getting another win streak and maybe fighting for the title next. I think that Corey Sandhagen is the favorite in this matchup, and he is going to beat Davison Figueiredo. I do think that 100% without a doubt that Corey Sandhagen is going to have a title eliminator against Peter Yan, and whoever wins that matchup is going to be the obvious contender to fight for the title next. I think that's the next big fight in the UFC. I think that Davison Figueiredo, the way that he got beat by Peter Yan, um, yeah, it exposed a lot. Davison Figueiredo wasn't as quick. He wasn't as sharp. He wasn't as athletic, and that could be because he's 5'5", fighting at bantamweight. That could be because he's having trouble, losing the weight for whatever reason. He moved up a division to have better weight, cuts, and it was still affecting him in the last fight. Like, he even mentioned it in the post fight interviews, which I found pretty surprising because he moved up a weight division. I mean, it could be a combination of a lot of things. Davison Figueiredo also is 37 years old. How many guys go on a title run being 37 years old? Not many. Not many. And Corey Sandhagen, obviously, right now being the younger guy, having a competitive fight against Umar Nurmagomedov. I mean, obviously, Corey Sandhagen lost that fight, but it was still a competitive fight. I think has the advantage in this one. I mean, if we look at these statistics, it's pretty much evident that Corey Sandhagen, might do more damage. He lands significantly more over Davison Figueiredo, and I think that this fight is gonna be obviously on the stand up, and Corey Sandhagen is no slouch on the striking. He's very, very good at striking. 5'11", Davison Figueiredo has to come in, and Corey Sandhagen knows all of this already, so he's gonna have a very, very good game plan to fight someone like Davison Figueiredo. And I think once he beats Davison Figueiredo, he is gonna be fighting Peter Yan on a title eliminator type bout, and that's going to be a big fight for the bantamweight. Like I said, there is no clear contender. There is no clear contender right now in the bantamweight division. When Corey Sandhagen beats Davison Figueiredo, he's going to be fighting Peter Yan for a title eliminator. And depending on who's champion, whether it's Sean O'Malley or Merab Dvalishvili, whenever that rematch does take place, Corey Sandhagen or Peter Yan is going to be fighting for the champion next, in my honest opinion. But that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. I know I go on like these ramble, whatever. I do tend to ramble, and I apologize for that. But if you guys enjoy all the rambling that I do in this video, make sure you guys to leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, please. Would definitely help me out a lot. And yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. As always, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Peace out and have a good one.